Hello, everyone. We're mixing it up with some music for the last session today. Thank you so much for staying around to meet us. We are really delighted to be here. Thank you to the brilliant CoMuseum team for looking after us and inviting us along today. So we brought you some music. That was a little bit of our Futures playlist, and we'll come back to that shortly. The purpose of our session this afternoon is to share our very recent experience of Futures literacy with you. And when I say recent, very recent, so we took part in a little adventure, a little experiment a month ago. So this is all very fresh in our minds. And the people you're going to meet today were all part of that workshop, which took place at Manchester Museum. And today and tomorrow, we're going to tell you a little bit about what we did. So I feel really lucky to be here. My name is Emmie, Kell. I am here with museum leaders whose work I find deeply inspiring and hopeful. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves to you before we tell you a bit more about what we did in Manchester.
Hello, I'm Dhikshana. I'm Head of Creative Programmes at London Museum. You heard from our director at London Museum earlier about the very exciting and amazing kind of vision and ambition we have there. And my role within it is, and I'm not just saying this because my ultimate boss is sitting in the room, but it is my dream job, and there's several reasons for that. I get to build and be part of building a brand new museum in the city that I was born and brought up in. I get to lead on a vision of a public programme that is going to break all the barriers on how we do public programming. And I get to establish a brand new department and think about those ways of working, not just within that department, but in the wider museum as well. And like I said, I was born and brought up in London. And so when we talk about lived experience, you could look at me and think of a particular lived experience that I might be bringing to a workplace. But in this role, I'm bringing that I was born and brought up. I used to be a young person that museums in London wanted to engage. I now lead the program of a city museum that's in my home city, and that is the most amazing and exciting role to have. When I started at the museum, I was reading a book called Tomorrow, which is about some young people growing up in America that are gamers in the 90s. And I read this quote that's written up there, and it really stayed with me because as I joined the museum and I met with Sharon and the wider museum, to understand the vision and ambition, what I realized we were doing was we were creating a London that you walk off the streets into it continues in the museum. So we're building a world. And that really stayed with me as I started to think about what the vision of this public program was. And the other thing is I came across this recently, this idea of riffing playfully. So in life, you meet somewhere and you say, hello, I'm Dhikshana. What's the weather like? Oh, I expected it to be warmer in Athens. But what if you started with, hello, I'm Dhikshana. My favorite cheese is halloumi. What's your favorite cheese? All of a sudden, it changes the conversation. You can be from any background, you can be from any lived experience that you have, but there's a playful way to find that connection and that shared experience. If we move to the next slide. These words, joy, hope, and optimism have come up several times today. And through the day, I have changed my opinion on them, but I've gone back to believing in why they're on this slide when I talk about myself. Joy is really important. Sharon talked about our brand, the grit and glitter. You will see glitter is much bigger than grit. And that was something as I joined, I was trying to balance it. How do you create a public program that can deal with the grit of London, but also the glitter? But when you're trying to reach 1 million people, and especially after the last 5 years and the world that we have all lived in, you need to have some joy. You need to have some glitter, and that is why they're bigger on the screen. When I think about hope is when we do tackle the grit of the stories that we need to tell as a museum, we want to do it from a place of being a force for good. We also want to do it from a place of hope. So we might not know the end result, but we want to be part of that conversation and bring people together. And optimism, I think of that internally. I think that I need optimism and I believe in it, and it helps me lead the teams that I'm leading as well. And then that riffing playfully. The things that we are always looking at and really connect to this futures literacy work that really helped me see my practice in a different way was being public, thinking about the audiences, always those the gamers, if you will, in that original quote, being emergent. And on a process level, the department that I lead works on live documents. Anyone can look at them in the museum and our external collaborators and can see where we are on that journey. We're not afraid to show that we might change direction. We might not have got something right, but we're going to evolve that emergent model and constantly reflecting. And then when I joined, the one thing that I really wanted to bring in is I knew we would make great content. I believed in all the expertise that was around us in the museum and with all our partners. But before we got there, I thought it was really important to set a vibe guide. And by vibe guide, we mean how do we engage all 5 senses and what's the feeling, atmosphere and energy we're trying to create. And in doing the Futures Literacy work, I realized that we do that in our programs. We do that in our museums. We don't tend to do that when we're doing an internal workshop or an internal meeting. We think about the very set things that we need to kind of achieve. And just very quickly before I hand over, an example, because that's just a lot of words on slides and a lot of theory that I've just spoken about, but it is happening. It's happening at London Museum. And I wanted to talk about it through the idea of chicken shops, which is quite interesting as a vegetarian. I spend a lot of time talking about chicken shops, but chicken shops are very important in London. They connect across food, culture and heritage. Our public programme is contemporary. It focuses on the last 80 years of London's history. And when you talk about chicken shops, you naturally start to talk about immigration and the communities that run them and the communities that go to them. But in developing our opening content, and our press team has embargoed us on so much, but I'm allowed to speak about this, what's really important is that what came before sets precedent for what comes next. And that changes it. It's not about new things replacing something else. It's about what came before sets a precedent. So chicken shops are important now, but pie and mash shops were really important in the past. Pie and mash shops were entrepreneurial, were family run, were really important in their local community, served communities that perhaps, where money was an issue, or families needed to eat fast because they had many jobs to go to. Chicken shops are just the evolution of that. And what will come next, we don't know. That's in the future. But the museum is constantly looking at how we tell those stories. And we use this idea of food or music or fashion or play as ways to look at the city through a lens that connects to lots of different people. So yeah, that's me and the museum.
It's me next. Hello, I'm Hannah Fox. I'm the Executive Director of the Bowes Museum. I've been there about 3 years. So a little bit about the Bowes Museum. It was created in the 19th century by this amazing woman artist, a French artist and philanthropist, Josephine Bowes, and her husband, John. When I came into the museum, which was 3 years ago, the mission was, we will celebrate everything about the legacy of John Bowes and his French wife, Josephine, which we have switched round, you might say, because actually he held her up as the visionary and creator of this museum. She believed deeply in the power of creativity to change lives. She'd lived it herself. She had been a vaudeville actor and later a really strong supporter, particularly of contemporary artists. And together, she and John set out to do something really bold. I mean, you can tell this is very bold. It's in a rural environment and you come through the gates and this is the wow factor that you get. They built a public museum, a deliberately public museum, a civic space from scratch. People often mistake it for a stately home, but it was actually taking its inspiration from a French civic town hall in Le Havre, which was somewhere very dear to Josephine and John. And it was always designed to be for people, open and generous and civic. Over 10 years, they then amassed an amazing collection of work by European artists, designers and makers as a gift to the people of the region and to the future. But Josephine was ill for much of that period, and she actually died at 48 years old before the museum was finished, and John died not that long after. So neither of them got to see this amazing gift that they left in perpetuity, along with a real belief of creativity and generosity and public good that we really think of, along with Josephine's spirit, as the centre of our mission today. To be this future-thinking museum that lifts up artists and designers and makers and strengthens our region through collaboration, generosity and collaboration. But the Bowes has been through a pretty difficult time, and it's almost had this moment of real challenge, maybe 5, 8, 10 years ahead of some of the times that we were in today, and that led to me joining it in 2022. To really think about and explore what that means to live up to that mission in a time of constant change that we're hearing about so much of today. And it takes, I think, some bold thinking, really. And that bold thinking is building on the bold thinking that led to them creating something like this. So we're thinking through that through the lens of long-term strategy. And I really mean long-term. So our strategy is called BOWS 2092, and it looks ahead to our 200th anniversary in 2092, nearly 70 years away, which will be beyond us. And I think that's really important to consider. It challenges every part of how we work, our business model, our digital potential, environmental commitments, the well-being and the development of our workforce, who are local people, and the care and the development of our assets. And looking that far ahead is forcing us to question what we assume is important, and to look honestly at the systems we're operating within, including the structures and the regulations and the funding models that can shape or restrict our choices. It's a way of asking, what if we take the long view? What would we do differently now if we're thinking in that longitudinal perspective? And this has been strengthened by the Futures Literacy programme, which has connected us with an amazing group of people who are considering and leading change in their organisations and their own contexts. And I think personally, it also speaks to my own professional background in human-centred design, because I love how the design mindset is naturally hopeful. It's grounded in listening and understanding and imagining possibilities and testing ideas together. And I think Futures Literacy really echoes that spirit beautifully.
Thank you. Well, hi everyone. Really lovely to be here. My name's Kim. I'm Chief Executive of Sheffield Museums. How many of you have been to Sheffield or to the UK? Oh, a few of you. That's really good. Well, for those of you who haven't been, you'll know. If you do visit, you'll find a very beautiful city. It's the only English city with a national park within its boundary. And in just 15 minutes from the city centre, you find yourself surrounded by breathtaking countryside. It's a very friendly city. It's very low-rise, very walkable. Now, Sheffield Museum cares for the city's collections, and they're like many of the collections we've heard about today. They were founded in the colonial period in the 19th century. They're collections of art and natural science and human history. And importantly, those collections were gifted to the city by its people. The museums celebrated their 150th anniversary just a couple of months ago. And we are campaigning at the moment to get people to engage with their museums and to support their museums into the future. But it's a gift. The entire collections are a gift from the people of Sheffield to the people of Sheffield. And our vision for the museums is that they enrich life in the city, that they connect people with their heritage and each other, and they create welcoming and inspiring experiences for everyone. We work with Sheffield's communities to tell remarkable stories of the city and its people, and to celebrate its reputation for excellence in craft and in making and in innovation. And if you have heard of Sheffield, it might have been in the context of steel or in the context of knives and forks. It's still something that is big in the city. So this picture that we're looking at now is from an exhibition called Show Your Metal from last year. And in Yorkshire speak, in UK Yorkshire speak, show your metal refers to your strength, the thing that you're proud of. It's talking about the kind of who you are, your spirit as a people. And this exhibition was designed to showcase the amazing things that are made in our city in the past 400 years, but today as well. And to inspire that sense of pride and that sense of joy in the people the many communities who've worked in the steel industry, but also to inspire the next generation of craftspeople and wondersmiths. And that's exactly what it did. I would say that everything that we do, whether it's exhibitions or events or displays, everything that we do collaboratively. We do it with communities. We do it with community members. We're working with artists. We're working with families and children and young people. We're working with our universities, and we're working with cultural partners across the city and across the region and nationally. The museums are one of the few places where people can come together locally. And in those spaces, they find joy, they learn about the world and each other, and they connect. And what we see is that they are loved by people. at the beginning of their lives and at the very end of their lives, and everyone in the middle. And what we see is that joy in the faces of school children. So when I come into the museum on a morning, I see kids laid on their tummies, sketching from the Ruskin collection. I hear people talking with joy and with pride and laughing, sometimes crying in workshops and activities. And you get that sense of pride expressed by visitors from all walks of life. So I feel that the museum is a gift and that it's loved by people, but of course that work never stops. I'd like our museums to be the places that Sandra talked about earlier, where everyone feels that they belong, where the 10 million people of London feel they belong, where the 580,000 people of Sheffield feel like they belong. But we have work to do. We know that there is huge potential for museums in our city to play a greater role in people's health and well-being and in to shape the city of the future. And in January, we're going to begin an 18-month programme where we do the strategic planning together with our teams and with our stakeholders. This is a piece of work that's been funded by National Lottery Heritage Fund, and we're calling it Defining a Decade. It's going to give us space. We've talked a little bit about that space to imagine the future, to embrace uncertainty, to be hopeful. And we hope it will help us to develop our capacity, develop our ability to embrace change, and to develop our confidence and our curiosity in adapting to what comes next. Many futures literacy practitioners describe how the present moment holds all of our potential futures. And this feels like a really important moment for us. So this session around futures literacy with the team here, with Pedro de Sena, it just felt like it absolutely dropped at the right time. And it was a really important time for us to reflect, but to use that hopefulness as a method for action.
Thank you, Kim. So I asked the panel to introduce themselves and say a bit about the context in which they work. And you can tell from listening to them how energetic and inspiring and brilliant they are. And what I want to say in my role as Director of Museums and Cultural Property at Arts Council England is that the context in which they're working is really tough. And it's been getting tougher over the last 10 years. And I'm sure that's something that many of you have been experiencing too. Arts Council England is in that liminal space that Lynn mentioned earlier. So we're not a part of government, but we are attached to it. We're called an arm's length body. And we support regional museums mainly, so not national museums. And we invest about £80 million in museums each year. And we do other things as well, like running the government indemnity scheme and various other bits and pieces. And in the doing of that work, I have lots of conversations with museum leaders across the country. And I do hear that word that was mentioned this morning, crisis, often. That is the narrative. And it is very much in the context of reduced local government funds. So lots of our larger regional museums outside of London are absolutely reliant on local government, not central government funding. And that over the last 10 years has taken a real hammering. We've seen that reduce. And what I've seen in that time is people that I've known for many years really carrying the weight of that and the pressure that I see that it puts on museum leaders, I have felt has grown significantly over the last 2 to 3 years. And so it's really hard, I think, to be imaginative in that space when you're having to do lots of firefighting, lots of short-term problem solving in an environment of financial precarity. And yet we know that imagination is the ingredient that we need more of in that kind of situation. And the founder of the Arts Council, John Maynard Keynes, reminds us with his famous quote that the difficulty lies not in finding new ideas, but in escaping the old ones. And that's really why I was inspired to kind of look into the futures literacy approach. And it was thanks to CoMuseum and the Museums Revisited work which took place in Poland in 2024, so last year, that I got to learn a bit more about it. And through a programme of work that I've been doing with Middlesex University, I met somebody who some of you, if you come to our session tomorrow, you'll get to meet him. He's called Pedro Dhikshana. And he's a futures literacy practitioner. And in conversation, he and I started to ask, might we be able to think differently if we change the conditions of our thinking? So we've talked a lot about the public today. We've listened to all the brilliant things that museums are doing with the public and communities. But what about the people who work in museums and the people who are leading museums in this environment of precarity? So that's why we thought, let's try an experiment. And Arts Council doesn't do experiments very often. You know, we're a big government attached organisation. This is a new thing for us. So we brought a group of people together. And we set out to do an introduction to futures literacy. And I'm sure there are experts in the room. We're not experts. This was a new thing for us. And what we wanted to do was try and see if we could imagine multiple futures for UK museums to reveal and reframe our anticipatory assumptions. And that really means the underlying thoughts and feelings upon which our images of the future are based. And that's really important. And Pedro taught me this because there is no data about the future because it doesn't yet exist. What we have are the images of the future, and that's what we work with. And that's why we talk about futures in the plural. So we wanted to move beyond the kind of typical linear planning that bodies like the Arts Council encourage people to think about. And it is dominant in the UK public sector. And we wanted to experiment with different approaches which are more able to embrace uncertainty and creativity. Dhikshana.
So we arrived in a very wet Manchester, but that was, the day only got better from there. So we arrived, and as Emmie said, Pedro, who is a futures literacy expert and using the UNESCO model, but has kind of adapted it and put kind of an embodied theatre practice to it. And then from there, we were doing lots of different things, from the way we moved around the room to the way we engaged with each other to different activities, which we'll talk about. But I think what's really important is we didn't just arrive at the workshop and then it started. Before we arrived, Pedro asked us all to share a song that made us think of the future. It could be hopeful, it could not be hopeful. It was our choice. So on arrival, that playlist was playing. We had teas and coffees and we connected. And then we went into 4 different stages of the futures literacy model and then explored those. And I'll share that shortly. But even at the end, the way he had structured the session, he'd called the end the lingering. So how we kind of stayed connected in the room afterwards before we all headed off home. And I think that's really important. I think within workplace, as we think about this stuff, even if we're being really creative in the sessions that we're having, we don't necessarily think about what happens before and what happens afterwards in that immediacy, and then what happens as those next steps. And so in that framing, it really made us think, well, it's how we plan these programs, or we plan these museums for our audiences. We should do the same to help us think about the future and creativity in a different way. So the day was broken into different parts of the futures literacy kind of model. I'm not going to speak to all of these points, but just pull out a couple. We started, after we had that welcome, we started with the Pollack game, which is where an imaginary line is on the floor, and all of us placed ourselves in that line about how we felt about the future. Really great at number 10, not so great at number 1, let's say. And then what we did in that moment is Pedro got us to speak to each other, to explain why we were positioned in that, why we had positioned ourselves in that place. And we spoke about it not necessarily as, museum workers. We spoke about that as ourselves, as much as we spoke about it as museum workers. And then he posed another question: how much do we feel on that scale that we could impact the future? And so we repositioned ourselves and then again shared that back. Another kind of game, if you will, or another movement activity that we did came in the reveal section, which was where we had to partner up. So all of a sudden you'd met people and you talked to them and you'd learned quite a lot about them already from the morning. And then you kind of probably had made your own assumption about how they might feel about the future of museums or, the kind of work that we're doing. And in those pairs, we had to decide how we would create a statue together, a physical statue using our bodies to explain how, we thought what we thought the future museums were. And that was really interesting. And then we went around the room, we all showed our statue, the rest of the group made an assumption about what we might be trying to show, and then we explained it as well. And then after a very tasty vegan lunch, we regrouped around the final two sections, which is around reframing and rethinking. And then in that, we did another statues piece of work where we thought about what is it that we imagine the future as an individual for the museums. And then our statues could move and connect to other people in the room and other groups. And we were forming our own stories through those statues and our own kind of future visions of that. And at the end of the day, just before we headed into lingering and kind of chatting, Pedro presented us all with, it went back to the Pollack game, the thing that we started with at the beginning. He gave us a piece of paper with a character, and that character had, you had an explanation of where they positioned themselves on that idea of where they felt about the future and how much they felt they could influence the future. And taking that away, we didn't have to do anything with it, or we could do something with it. But the idea was that imagine this person is coming to your museum, and how are you responding to that, and what are you thinking about? So you had something to think about on that train journey home. And so, lots of different activities, and happy to speak about more of them as we go through.
Okay, over to me. And actually, it's back to you. So over to you. We're going to ask for some audience participation. Dun, dun, dun. So it's given the space that we've got here, it's difficult to replicate the activities that Dhikshana shared. But we want to give you a taste of some of the thinking that we've been exploring. And we might do this ourselves as well, because we've actually, this is about using these tools live. So we're introducing the Futures Triangle. It's a really versatile tool that was developed by Sohail Inayatullah. It helps us understand what's shaping the future right now. It shows how the forces interact to create or block change. So I would encourage you to just take a moment, take a look at this triangle. Maybe you've got a piece of paper, you want to make some notes on your phone potentially, but consider how this applies to you in maybe your personal or your professional life. So one, then the pull of the future. What we want. These are the compelling visions, the preferred futures, the dreams that you might have, the innovations, or the emerging possibilities that pull us forwards. For example, a zero carbon economy or a healthier, fairer society. What future vision is motivating you? Perhaps it's in your organizational or personal mission. And then two, the push of the present. What's driving the change today? Current trends, technologies, data, social forces that might create momentum, like demographic shifts or new technologies or climate pressures or changing audience behaviours, for example. What forces are then pushing us towards the change? And then we've got three, the weight of the past. So what's holding us back? Old habits or structures or cultures and assumptions that resist change. For example, legacy systems or regulations or cultural norms or beliefs or even institutional inertia. What historical forces or structures can constrain us? So take 2 minutes to just think individually, just jot down some notes or feelings that come up. If you're at home, you can do this as well. And we'll just give you that 2 minutes to do that in peace. Just 20 more seconds. Okay, I'm sure there's more that you want to add and jot down or think about. in this. So we're just giving it as a little bit of a gift, as a tool. But by mapping these three forces, we can see maybe about what's the preferred future. So what's achievable, a strong pull, for example, a strong push, and maybe a light weight. Or what's stalled, what's got substantial weight that's holding back some of the change that we're trying to drive forwards. What might be a bit chaotic, strong pushes, but no clear vision towards what we're working towards. Or even transformative. Maybe there's a really clear alignment between the vision and the drivers and your readiness. So maybe over drinks tonight, you might want to talk about some of the things that you kind of came up for you. But please feel free to talk to us afterwards about some of the things that emerged as you were thinking about that, and maybe take that back into your organisations or teams as well.
Thank you, Hannah. So the exercise that we just did, although it was really very simple, reveals the way that in just talking about the triangle to your neighbour or thinking about it, allows you to find new thoughts about the future. And we can begin to see how our futures, presents and past, are connected. Through the workshop that we did with Pedro, we had a whole day at this. And I think that was really quite amazing for us to be able to enter a space together and to be able to sort of shrug off the clothes of leadership and to put away the linear planning and put away all the things that we bring with us as baggage and just be human in that space together. And I think it's true to say that it's sort of changed us all. I think it's sent us all on a slightly different path in just one day. What we've taken from it, though, is that we really feel that we need more spaces like this to be able to think about future in different ways. We need spaces as leaders and as teams of people who love museums and who run museums to have some free thinking, to be creative and to experiment. And really, I think one of the things that came through this thinking was that the workshops helped us to surface some of the constraints that we have on the future. So the biases, the fears, the pressures of the day that we bring with us. It also kind of brought many perspectives into the room, that we all come from a slightly different point of view, even amongst this very small group of peers. And I think it also taught us that the value of creative, performative methods in unlocking our imagination. I have to say, as someone who doesn't do theatre, did drama very briefly at school, shrugging off the clothes of leadership and getting into a space where we were imagining creating statues together and moving in the room was challenging, but actually I found it so refreshing to be able to do it, and I would commend it to you. And I think the thing that we were left with is that we all need each other to do this work. As we imagine the future, we need to do that collaboratively. We need to be doing it with each other, learning from each other, building that future together. So it was just one day, and I would really encourage you to spend some time on it. We've got a masterclass tomorrow.
We have, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Kim. So these are the questions that arose for us during that workshop. This was the only flip chart that we used during the day because we didn't have any Post-its or any kind of the normal exercises that we've all been used to doing when we do workshops or away days. And the approach that we used was really unfamiliar to me. I'd never experienced anything like it before. Performance for futures, an embodied approach. And what Pedro encouraged us to do was to focus on sensing before sense making. And that was really a light bulb moment for me, because that's how you get to those underlying anticipatory assumptions and really start to challenge what's going on. So we've got the questions here that we asked. It's great that we've already talked about planting seeds and planting trees. That was a question that came up for us. And finally, we'll return to the music. So this is our playlist. And we would love to invite you to join our playlist and add your own song, any kind of music. We invite you to think of a piece of music with or without lyrics that makes you think about the future. That's what we were asked to do before the workshop, and we'd love you to join in. And you can scan the QR code or use the link on screen. Your music might evoke hope or anticipation or uncertainty. You heard Doctor Who playing when we came onto the stage. That was one of the songs that our group chose. Or it might be any other future-orientated feeling. If music isn't your thing, We love poetry. We'd love a poem from you, or maybe some pictures, or just your thoughts. What does this way of approaching things creatively make you think and feel? We'd love you to share that with us. And you can use the hashtags for the conference to do that. We really came away feeling that connections and the connections for creativity hold so much potential. And we'd love to build those connections for creativity with you all. Who knows where it might lead? Thanks for listening.